Hello guys, this is Mike from Drops, and we are at Ankr Meetup in Moscow, and we have a great chance to speak to Ryan Fang from Ankr.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Ryan. Ryan is CEO and one of co-founders of Ankr. So, Ryan, very nice to meet you in Moscow. Yeah, and could you please tell us about your first impressions about the city? You've come just today. What have you seen? How do you like Moscow?
Absolutely.
How's your visit?
You know, Moscow has always been one place I've always wanted to visit since I'm a little kid, and I had a great experience here so far. I had a great traditional Russia lunch, and everything here is just so beautiful. And I look forward to come here more in the future.
Before we come to discuss Ankr, can you please tell a little bit about your personal story? How did you start? What was the beginning of your story? How did you come to blockchain space? All the stuff.
Thanks to the CEO of the project and then the co-founder Chandler. Chandler essentially introduced me to Bitcoin blockchain back in 2014, and that was the time we just entered college. And though we've only met a couple of weeks, Chandler say, look, Ryan, you should probably buy some Bitcoin. And that 22 Bitcoin, Chandler and I we bought combined, was essentially the seed funding of our own project. So we at the very beginning was self-funded the project, and I have more of a finance and the statistics background, and Chandler and Stanley, which is our CTO, they have a stronger cloud and blockchain background. Stanley was actually one of the founding engineers of Amazon EC2. Now, when we got together and think about how the current cloud computing service business could be transformed or in some way complemented, is that we believe lots of the computational tasks could be done in a distributed fashion, which can largely reduce the infrastructure cost, the human capital cost, as well as the large operating margin. Now that's sort of a brief, elevated story of how we got into Bitcoin blockchain and how the company was originally funded.
I'm pretty sure that most of our viewers know a lot about Ankr, but for those who are not well informed about this project, could you please tell us about the basic concept behind this project and the basic ideas that stay behind Ankr?
Ankr is a decentralized cloud computing platform built on trusted hardware. Now, different from many other projects who do the decentralized cloud computing on essentially the smart contract level, we do it on the consensus level, on the sort of chip level. Now, utilize the proof of useful work consensus mechanism, we were able to essentially utilize otherwise idle computational resources or wasted computational resources and use them to do useful works for enterprises, for scientific researchers, and for all kinds of general purpose CPU related work.
And could you please tell us about your roadmap? At what stage is the project right now? What are your plans for the near future? And what is your vision, long-term vision of the project?
Just at today's Russian meetup, we were able to, though the quality of the video wasn't necessarily that great because of the screen sharing issues, but essentially this was the first time we showed our prototype, our demo, our MVP essentially to everyone in the world. So we're proudly telling everyone that right now a lot of jobs that usually people run on Amazon, AWS, the computational type of task could be run on Ankr's decentralized platform. And from the original 6 nodes, we expanded, now it's runnable on 13 nodes, even with the inclusion of essentially a cloud computing service. A more traditionally cloud computing service can also essentially acting as a node. So we think we are making great progress on the prototype or MVP aspect, and we're going to have our testnet at the end of September, and we are able to launch our mainnet or a fully publicly usable product by the end of the year.
At the moment, this market is pretty crowded with very strong big players with high valuation. I mean, centralized companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and many others. And what is your killer feature? How are you going to compete with these big guys? Do you have any kind of secret strategy to invade this market?
When we think about our company's position and strategy, we don't really think about us as a AWS competitor or as a Microsoft competitor. We're not thinking about that. We're not essentially positioning ourselves as a competitor to the centralized cloud computing. On the other hand, in fact, we are sort of positioning us as a complementary service or alternative to certain types of computational tasks. We want to do it step by step. We don't want to, blindly make promises. It's just like you have Airbnb, you still have your house, you have your Uber, you still have your car. Now, that's same for Ankr. They're serving a lot of the stuff that's going to be rely on centralized cloud computing service for a while. For example, hosting web services. You cannot necessarily run that on Ankr because it's computational focused. But we think a lot of our other jobs, for example, machine learning, model training, those computational focused jobs can be run on Ankr's platform with a much cheaper price. Why? Because compared to the centralized computing platforms, we don't have the large infrastructure server farm cost. We don't have the huge human capital cost. And because it's a decentralized model, there's no, effectively there's no operating margin involved. Now, with those three large chunk of centralized computing's, revenue, essentially being cut, we are confident that decentralized model can provide similar value, similar output, but much cheaper price.
And what about your competitors in blockchain space? Because there are a lot of projects in cloud computing already. What do you think of them? How can you compare Ankr to these projects? What are your unique features compared to these projects?
There are two main sort of differentiating factors that Ankr have compared to other decentralized cloud computing projects. Obviously, we also look at other people in the space, and we think many of them have done tremendous job in the space. But here in Ankr, there are two things. The first is that we are one of the only, if not the only, cloud computing, decentralized cloud computing platform that utilizes trusted hardware. Now, with trusted hardware, because essentially you can verify the execution of the job in the enclave. So essentially, A, you can largely reduce the redundancy, and B, you can largely sort of, preserve the privacy. Now, that's something the enterprises cares a whole lot, right? Now, the second part of our advantage is the fact that we are a proof of useful work. The computation is run essentially on the consensus level, on the chip level. It's running in your CPU. Comparatively, a lot of other decentralized cloud computing service, essentially they're essentially very fat, smart contract protocol. That sort of was limited by smart contract, because as we all know, a lot of the things cannot be done on smart contract. Now, that's one of the limitations some of the other projects might have that we don't have. And lastly, we think something is crucial is the fact that we always like to make this analogy. You can always light a fire. If decentralized cloud computing is an action item of lighting a fire, right? You can either use a very complex protocol, very complex method, just like using match, very artful way to light a fire, or you use a lighter. In our case, we leverage existing industry-ready chip solutions like TE, and all the chip makers like NVIDIA, like Intel, like AMD, they're all moving towards this chip manufacturing trend. Now, we think it's a smart idea to essentially utilize the hardware to achieve the similar goal.
During the meetup, we had a video call with your CTO, who demonstrated the demo version. Can you please tell about the development stage and a little bit about this demo you showed?
So what the CTO just showed is essentially a comparison of AWS and Ankr's decentralized cloud computing network. Now, the very similar tasks were able to run on AWS and also fully functional on our Ankr's decentralized platform. Now, all of those jobs were essentially done, on on people's personal computers in a distributed fashion. There are 13 nodes along with a cloud node, essentially. And we think that proves the fact that what we are hoping to achieve is achievable, right? And we think the development process going into the future will obviously add more and more feature to it, and obviously having the token fully functional in the system so that it is going to be truly a utility that people use for payments. Now, that will achieve the tremendous, micro payment sort of feat that volunteer computing or traditional distributed computing were not able to achieve. So we think we're having a very big first step, and we think there are more and more going to follow along.
And we have a very big community, including different people, not only investors but also developers. So let's assume I'm a developer and I want to join the Ankr development. What should I do?
Definitely email us on Korea at Ankr.Network or reach out to me or to the CEO or to the CTO personally on Telegram. We will try to get to the message as soon as possible, but we truly think developers in Russia are outstanding, are in my opinion really better than vast majority of people around the world. Very, very smart, hardworking, very insightful.
Is there something you want to add to this interview in the end? Maybe you want to say or to wish something to ICO Drops community?
I think so when talking about AnkrNetwork's vision or what we want to achieve in the long run, and so this is sort of something we want to share with the community, is the fact that we hope everyone truly know what we're doing, and the AnkrNetwork, we hope we're not just a ticker on the exchange, or it's just not ANKR3 or 4 almost meaningless letters. We want to bring the vision of distributed computing, even the idea of universal basic income that's provided by a computer. We want to bring this vision to everyone in the community, to everyone in the world. That's the main thing I want to say.
Thanks for a great interview.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoy your time in Moscow.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.